Hello and welcome to this HESIS training video. In this video we're going to look at the definitions of engagements and years of engagement, or YOE as we sometimes refer to them as. And then we'll look at how to count years of engagement, first for further education in sixth form colleges and academies, and then for all other providers. We'll look at the concept of non-standard years, and then we'll look at the type of situation that occasionally occurs where you have two courses in one engagement. Next, we're going to look at the idea of level of study and how to determine that for use in the workbook. And then we're going to go on to look at the idea of new entrants, how we define that for use in section B of tables 1 and 2. Let's start with what we mean by an engagement. So to define this, we'll say that an engagement is a student's commitment to an educational aim, a qualification, or for credit, and its realization over time. It will have one or more years of engagement, and these are defined differently for each type of provider. For further education and sixth form colleges and academies, or FECs, this is defined with reference to the anniversary of the student's start date. This corresponds with the term years of instance in the individualized learner record that is submitted to the Department for Education, the DFE. You may also come across this term if you look at HESIS returns from before the 2023-24 academic year. For other providers, an engagement is defined in the same way as on the HESA student record. This means that providers will usually base their years of engagement on the latest student course session that starts in the current academic year. Let's look at both of these groups. First, those providers who return data to the ILR, that is further education in sixth form colleges and academies. As with all numbers recorded in HESIS, we record students on courses that meet our definition of recognised higher education. We talked about that in one of the previous videos. The first year of engagement is generated when a student begins studying towards a qualification. For example, if this is on the 4th of October, that's when their first year of engagement starts. Second and subsequent years of engagement will start on or near the anniversary of when the student first started studying. So for this student that starts on the 4th of October 2025, their second year of engagement will start on the 4th of October 2026, and so on for following years until they complete their course. The dates here aren't completely rigid, as we do allow for minor variations in term dates, but generally we're looking at the anniversary of the start date, so it is important to know what that is. Remember that years of engagement are only countable if all of the following criteria are met. First, that a fee is charged. Exceptionally, it may be waived on an individual basis. See Annex C1 for full details about this. Next, that students cannot be writing up, that is to say a thesis or a dissertation or something like that, for the whole year of engagement. They must be actively studying to have a year of engagement counted. Finally, that they must not have withdrawn within 2 weeks of starting the engagement. We mean here having left the course entirely, and not just those who may have suspended their studies. Let's stay with further education in sixth form colleges and academies for a moment. To ensure that we are recording years of engagement correctly in the HESIS survey, the key is to remember that the academic year that a year of engagement starts in determines which HESIS survey it's counted in. To show this, we'll fill in this diagram to represent the study activity of two students, one on the bottom row in yellow, the other on the top row in light blue. In this example, we're using the 2024-25 and 2025-26 academic years, but if you're seeing this video in later years, please adjust the years accordingly. The first of these students is following the more common autumn to spring schedule, the latter perhaps January to December or something like that. And for them, you can see that their studies overlap academic years. We'll come back to this in a moment. However, both students started their courses in the 2024-25 academic year and are continuing on to their second years in the 2025-26 academic year. So what gets recorded where? Well, the first student's first year of engagement started in academic year 2024-25, so it would have been recorded in HESIS 24. The second student's first year of engagement also begins in the academic year 2024-25, so it too was recorded in HESIS 24, even though some of the activity for the student occurs in the 2025-26 academic year. It's not split in any way. All of the activity for it will have been recorded in HESIS 24. In the following year, the same occurs again. Both years of engagement begin in the 2025-26 academic year, so again, both the first student's second year of engagement and the second student's second year of engagement are recorded in their entirety in HESIS 25. Now, for all other providers, those that are returning data to the designated data body student record, currently also known as the HESIS student record, we will still count years of engagement, but these will be determined in a slightly different way. As with the FECs, we'll use the 2024-25 and 2025-26 dates for illustration purposes. If you're watching this sometime later, do please adjust accordingly. As with the FECs, for students studying on courses that meet our definition of recognised higher education for OFS funding purposes, their study will have one or more years of engagement in their engagement with the provider. The latest student course session, or SCS, which starts or is predicted to start in the current academic year, should be used to determine the year of engagement for HESIS. For example, if a student begins a student course session on the 4th of October, that would be the start of their year of engagement. Second and subsequent years of engagement will be based on the relevant student course session for that academic year. So if a student that started their first SCS on the 4th of October 2024 for the 2024-25 academic year, and their second student course session is starts on the 28th of September 2025 for the 2025-26 academic year, the year of engagement would start on the 28th of September 2025. And we'll say the same here as we just have for further education colleges. We don't count all years of engagement in HESIS. They are only countable if all of the following criteria are met. As before, if a fee is charged, so exceptionally it might be waived on an individual basis. See Annex C2 for full details about this. Next, that students cannot be writing up a thesis or a dissertation or something like that for the whole year of engagement. They must be actively studying to have a year of engagement counted. And finally, they have not withdrawn within 2 weeks of starting their engagement. And again, as we said before, this means leaving the course entirely and not just those who are suspending their studies. So to reiterate, for all other non-FEC providers, we are using the concept of student course sessions to determine years of engagement. For each engagement, only one student course session should be used to determine the year of engagement. So let's look at this in this diagram. And again, if you're seeing this video in later years, adjust the years accordingly. The student's first SCS will begin when they begin their study activity, represented here by SCS-A. The student will then continue studying for the subsequent 3 years, with each year generating a new SCS, and so on. That's simple enough. So the student has a single SCS per year, so that is what is used. However, let's say the student decides to change course from perhaps physics to maths. Under the specification for the designated data body student record, if the student decides to join the cohort which began studying in September, no new SCS would be generated, in which case the same student course session, SCSA, should be counted for HESIS. For this type of occurrence, remember to check that the correct course information is recorded. For example, by doing this change, the subject grouping that applies may also have changed. However, if the student decides to start the course from scratch and joins a cohort that starts in January, then SCSA would end and a new student course session, SCSC, would begin. This is because the student has changed cohorts. Again, this is based on the student record specification. In this circumstance, the provider should disregard the activity in SCSA and base a year of engagement off SCSC. as it is the latest student course session in the 2024-25 academic year. The student would then continue a normal pattern of study in subsequent years. Now, there's a danger that you need to be aware of. In order to recognise this, we need to lay out some ideas about the concept of standard and non-standard years of engagement. You won't find this terminology in the HESIS workbook, but it's a useful way to think about years of engagement to ensure that we are returning them correctly. For HESIS, a standard year is one where all of the activity of a year of engagement is contained within a single academic year, by which we mean the period between the 1st of August and the following 31st of July. On the screen is an example of this. Box A shows activity in 2024-25 for this year started on or after the 1st of August 2024 and that was completed before the 1st of August 2025. And the following year is a standard year 2 as seen in box B, as again all the activity for the year of engagement is contained within one academic year. Standard years are likely to be the pattern for the majority of students, mostly starting in September or October and taking end-of-year exams in May or perhaps June. Here we can see an example of a non-standard year. The year depicted by box A shows that study activity starts in January after the census date. What's different here is that the students' activity runs from January to December, following a calendar year pattern. This is just an example, but the important point here is that their study activity spans 2 academic years. This is what we call a non-standard year. The same pattern is repeated in box B. Their second year of engagement starts in the following January on the anniversary of the first, and it finishes in December, also spanning 2 academic years. So this is where we need to be careful, and on the next slide we'll see why. But let's just rewind a bit. Once again, a reminder that in the example we're using 2024, 25 and 25, 26. If you're watching this in later years, please adjust accordingly. We've seen that the year of engagement shown in box A is non-standard, and because of the pattern of study, the student will still be studying on their 2024-25 year of engagement on the HESIS 25 census date. What we want to avoid is recording the year of engagement for box A in HESIS 25. This is because in HESIS 25 we're only recording those years of engagement that start in the 2025-26 academic year. For HESIS 25, only the blue-green box, box B, is recorded. Year of engagement B contains student activity starting in January 2026 and running until December 2026. And this is the year of engagement starting in the 2025-26 academic year, and therefore is the one that should be recorded in HESIS 25. Box A would have been recorded in HESIS 24 in the previous year, as the year of engagement started in the 2024-25 academic year. Ultimately, the point that we're making here is that you must ensure that you are clear about which years of engagement belong to which HESIS return. Again, the easiest way to tell this is that those years of engagement that start in the current academic year should be returned in the current HESIS return. If you're still unsure about which year of engagement goes where, please get in contact with the funding team at our HESIS mailbox, hesis@officeforstudents.org.uk, and we will be able to help you. One final thing to note, when a student progresses directly from one course to another at the same broad level, which is to say perhaps undergraduate or postgraduate taught, we would consider this to be a single engagement for HESIS purposes. A typical example here would be a top-up scenario. For example, going straight from a high national certificate in HNC and then following on to a top-up to a high national diploma at an HND course. Both of these are at the same broad level, in this case undergraduate level. If in doubt about how to treat this kind of scenario, please get in touch with us. We use section B on tables 1 and 2 to categorise some students as new entrants. A student can be counted as a new entrant when they first generate a countable year for that engagement, and they have not been active at the same broad level, which is to say at undergraduate or postgraduate taught level, at the provider in either of the 2 previous academic years. This does not include students repeating a year, but can include students entering directly onto the second or subsequent years of a course. Full details are in the HESIS guidance. See Annex C1 for further education colleges and C2 for other providers. Finally, don't confuse new entrants on tables 1 and 2 with starters that you may see on table 4, the health table. These are not the same groups, although there may be some overlap. Throughout the workbook, you'll see the division between the different levels of study: UG, meaning undergraduate, and PGT, postgraduate taught. We define each of these levels in relation to the qualifications needed for entry to the course. Thus, for undergraduate, there is no degree level entry requirement. For postgraduate taught, the normal entry requirement is a degree level qualification. We have a number of resources for providers, and we'll look at the main ones here, but we will also highlight additional resources as we go through this series of recordings. For a high-level view of OFS funding, see our Finance and Funding page, www.officeforstudents.org.uk/for-providers/finance and funding, with the last two parts of that URL having the words hyphenated. For an overview of recurrent funding specifically, add the hyphenated words recurrent funding to the last URL, or perhaps an easier way is to use the search function on our main web page and enter recurrent funding. For more detail about funding, see our annual guide to funding, and you can search for that term on our website to find the latest edition. The best place to start for HESIS resources is the main HESIS page on the OFS website, which can be found at www.officeforstudents.org.uk/HESIS, and of course that is HESES. To stay informed about OFS announcements, including those relating to funding, you can sign up for our email alert service. Visit www.officeforstudents.org.uk/sign up for email alerts, and as usual, the last part of that URL is hyphenated. Thank you for listening and watching.